privacy laws, both in this region but increasingly globally, are principally based on principles. So we talk about data minimization, purpose limitation, security and data integrity. And ultimately, what we're trying to do as an organization, as every other organization is trying to do, is process data in a compliant way. That's ultimately it, right? And so meeting these principles is key. And any technology tools that we can leverage in a safe and effective manner, and effective can be from a resource perspective, but also more broadly from a kind of, does it work, obviously, is helpful and is kind of worth exploring to some extent. So that's kind of the stage that we are at. So I mentioned data minimization. Clearly, if you're reducing the identifiability of a data set, then ultimately you're reducing the volume of PI or SPI that's shared, which helps limit the risks in any specific context, whether that's internal. So we at Marsh McLennan are often looking at ways to leverage the data that we have at Marsh in the context of other businesses, right? So you might have Oliver Wyman, who are a consultancy business ultimately, wanting to try and use some of the masses of data that Marsh has in the health insurance space, say. How can we make that happen without breaching contractual terms, without breaching regulatory compliance requirements, and without kind of annoying our clients? So PETs are an interesting way to try and figure out how to kind of optimize those data flows and overcome something that I'm often see described as the data paradox, which is that organizations hold masses and masses of data, but it's often siloed, it's often not necessarily the best quality, and it's often difficult to tap into that potential. There's a lot of unlocked potential. Why? Because of the kind of format that data is in, because of the restrictions, contractual or otherwise, that exist with respect to its use. So I think PETs are a way to help us tackle some of those core principles and to try and meet those compliance needs. And they're also, whether they work or not, I think looking into them shows regulators a level of proactivity, a level of trying, right? You're trying to make things work in a compliant way, which I think can only be beneficial. We're certainly looking at, and when I say we, I mean the data team, the digital innovation teams, like various different groups are involved in kind of trying to identify vendors who can provide a helpful solution to our often very specific and sometimes niche use cases. And I think that's not, as you've mentioned, Katie, necessarily easy. There aren't kind of an obvious list of your top 3 vendors in this space, as one might find in other kind of areas of compliance or other areas where you might engage a vendor to support. So I think for me, what would be really helpful to see, so those are kind of some of the external challenges. For the internal challenges, I think more of an emphasis on, why would the business want to do this? I think making that argument internally to the relevant stakeholders, the first step is, exploring what might be helpful and how can we make it work for us. And the second step is actually saying, right, we need to cough up the money to put this into place. And, as I'm sure is the same in your businesses, it's not always an easy argument to make, particularly where your main kind of goal is, well, we want to be compliant with privacy regulation. So I think highlighting the business benefits is really key, and getting the right stakeholders on board internally. So I personally would like to see, more materials kind of emphasizing that point, right? Supporting this idea that we're not just talking about boring legal and regulatory compliance, we're talking about how do we get our clients what they want to see, whether that's more benchmarking or other data and insights, like how we're helping our clients, or we're providing insights to our clients by harnessing the masses of data that we hold. So I think that's something that I think would help in the space.